I watched from across the operations bay as Ian Merrill, yes, that Ian, stood up from his desk like a man rising from a funeral. His own. The new CEO, Ryan Callahan, hadn't even looked him in the eye, just slid a termination letter across the desk while scrolling his phone like a damn teenager ordering DoorDash. We're eliminating non-essential roles, Ryan mumbled, already waving security over like Ian was a virus to be quarantined. Ian didn't blink, didn't flinch, just looked at Ryan, then at the HR intern fidgeting by the printer. Let's do this properly, he said. No emotion, no argument. Like he'd already buried this company 100 times in his head and was just waiting for it to catch up. That's when I saw it. The way his hand hovered over the photo on his desk. Him and Alan Worth, the original founder, standing in front of the first Silvertree warehouse, all steel beams and wet cement. Ian looked at that photo like it was a grave marker. Then he walked out. No box, no goodbyes, just gone. If you're still listening, pause for 1 second and tap the subscribe button and like the video. 97% of people who watch these stories never do, but it helps keep this channel alive and lets us bring you more insane true stories like this one. Here's the thing no one at corporate seemed to remember. Ian wasn't some mild-mannered logistics fossil. He was the reason this place ran. While Ryan and his strategy council were off installing ping-pong tables and hiring LinkedIn influencers, Ian was the one rebuilding the supply chain after the fire in '09. He was the one who got us through the vendor recall in 2014 when every third-party part from Guangdong arrived mislabeled. And he was the one who kept showing up when half the C-suite were off-site doing vision quests or whatever HR retreat nonsense they cooked up. But because he wore fleece vests and took his lunch at the same table every day, they thought he was wallpaper, a fixture. They thought he'd fade like the old paint on the break room ceiling tiles. I'd watched it happen slowly. His name disappearing from meeting invites, his input getting noted and buried. Then one day, poof, off the org chart completely, replaced with a director of culture engagement and a goddamn TikTok intern who once asked me if UPS was like a startup. So when he got canned, most people shrugged. Sucks, but he was probably going to retire anyway, someone whispered by the copier. Someone else joked. They needed the budget for another vegan donut wall. The air was full of caffeine and cluelessness, but I knew something was off. Ian didn't look defeated when he left. He looked finished, like a man who had just closed a chapter and already started writing the ending. What none of them knew, what I only found out later, was that Ian had been playing a game none of them even realized existed. For 20 years, he'd quietly cashed out his bonuses, skipped raises, and funneled everything into one thing: ownership. Silent equity, legacy class F, shares that most of the new leadership didn't even realize were still active. Buried behind shell firms, routed through a blind trust, and tied to founding bylaws none of the buzzword boys ever bothered to read. And now they'd fired him. They thought they were cutting cost. They'd just cut the spine. Ian didn't drive off right away. He just sat there, in that dusty old Subaru he'd parked in the same spot for 15 years, staring straight ahead like the windshield was a movie screen playing back every stupid moment Ryan Callahan had ever cut him off mid-sentence. The, let's keep this high level, Ian. The, maybe logistics isn't where innovation happens. The, we need modern thinkers in the driver's seat. Hell, I still remember the meeting when Ryan told the ops team to start calling the warehouse the fulfillment arena. Ian didn't even blink, just clicked his pen, made a note, and moved on. Now he sat in that car, calm as still water, reached into the glove box and pulled out a navy blue folder, legal stock paper, tabs, highlighter marks so faint they looked like fading scars. Across the front, in gold foil, Silvertree Voting Trust, Class F Holdings. I didn't see it myself. I only heard about it later, after everything detonated, but I imagine his fingers resting on it like a weapon he'd buried long ago. And now? Time to dig it up. He didn't call HR, didn't call his wife, didn't call the friend who once told him to stop caring so much about a company that doesn't even list you on the About page anymore. He called one person, Evan Rourke, former co-founder, now a lawyer running a sleepy one-man practice 2 towns over that still used fax machines and kept coffee in a percolator, the kind of man who reads bylaws the way priests read scripture. Ian said 6 words, Activate the conversion clause. I'm taking direct control. Evan didn't even ask why, just replied, understood. They never updated the bylaws. That's when it started. See, what no one realized, not legal, not Ryan, not the army of culture rebrand consultants they'd hired, was that Ian's equity wasn't gone. It was silent. Tucked away behind 3 shell companies, a blind voting trust, and a legacy clause from 2001 that allowed Class F shares to convert into direct voting rights at the discretion of the holder. Nobody ever questioned who that holder was, because nobody cared. Because Ian made himself small. Because he let them forget. But he hadn't forgotten. He hadn't forgotten the years of skipped vacations to buy another half point in Series B. Hadn't forgotten selling his second car when they almost missed payroll in '07 so he could make a bridge loan and secure an extra 0.%. Hadn't forgotten when they brought in Ryan, fresh from crashing a lifestyle app startup, and told Ian to mentor him on supply realities. Then erased Ian's name from the executive summary 6 months later. 83.2%. That's what he controlled. Not on paper you'd find in the HR binder, not in the investor slide deck, but in the filings Evan had kept pristine, double notarized, buried in a drawer no one else even had a key to. He didn't punch the steering wheel, didn't scream, didn't light up a cigarette like someone in a revenge movie. He just adjusted the air vents, turned off the dashboard display, and tapped his fingers once on the leather folder. They thought they'd walked him out. They had no idea he'd just stepped in. The next morning, the old brass bell over Evan Rourke's law office let out a tired clang as Ian stepped inside, the same way he had 2 decades ago with nothing but a 3-slide pitch and a handshake deal. The place still smelled like legal pads and dust, and the thermostat still read 66 because Evan said, "Cold minds think clearer." Evan looked up from his desk without surprise, just slowly removed his glasses like a man who'd been waiting for this knock for 20 years. They didn't talk small. Didn't reminisce, just spread out the founding charter and began tracing the paper scars of a company they'd both bled into. Evan flipped pages while Ian sipped black coffee from a chipped mug that still had the old Silvertree logo, back when the company had a pine tree and a damn soul. "Here," Evan said, tapping a section near the bottom margin. "Board expansions post-2015, none ratified by shareholder vote, executive appointments tied to Series D liquidity guarantees. All conditional on proxy approval." Ian nodded, which they never got. They didn't even ask, Evan said. Assumed the trust was dead, like you. They circled names, highlighted appointments, marked inconsistencies. Ryan had stacked the board with yes men, compliance-light, strategy-heavy, investor-friendly buzzards who sat through quarterly calls like they were TED Talks and nodded at any sentence containing the words synergy or agile scaling. Not a single one of them had been vetted through the legacy channels. Why would they? No one thought Class F still mattered. No one thought Ian still mattered. So Ian took out his phone and composed a single email. Not dramatic, not threatening, just one line. "Per my shareholder authority, please schedule a governance review." He CC'd the executive assistant, the general counsel, the full board, no emojis, no legalese, just quiet gravity. Then he opened the company calendar, still had access because IT hadn't cleared him yet, and created an event. Subject line, reconstitution. No agenda, no meeting notes, just one word and a time. Wednesday, 9:00 a.m., main boardroom. That was it. The ripple started slow. A few reply-alls from confused assistants. Then the GC's terse, "Please clarify authority basis." Ian didn't respond. He didn't need to. The bylaws were attached. Their own damn documents, signed in ink back when the company was still renting folding chairs and had one copy machine that printed everything sideways. Meanwhile, Evan quietly began submitting shareholder affidavits through the state corporate registry. Legacy proxy revoked. Direct control assumed. Majority stakeholder rights executed. It wasn't flashy. No announcements, no headlines. But piece by piece, Ian's hand slid across the chessboard while the other side was too busy self-branding on LinkedIn to even realize they were being played. The new world wasn't built in bombast. It was built in footnotes. Footnotes that Ian had written, Evan had preserved, and Ryan had never bothered to read. He didn't want his job back. That wasn't the point. He was setting the table. and they were all about to choke on what they thought was theirs. Ryan Callahan was mid-sip on his $19 artisanal cold brew when the email came through. Subject: Reconstitution. He snorted, forwarded it to legal with the comment, "Old guys pulling a Jerry Maguire, ignore." Then he tossed his phone onto the reclaimed wood desk he insisted be installed in his office for aesthetic flow, and went back to choosing which startup podcast quote to open the next all hands with. Legal didn't laugh. Andrea Morales, general counsel, sharp as a scalpel and twice as patient, opened the attachment, adjusted her glasses, and read line 47 of the founding articles twice, then once more aloud. Clause 14B, Class F Governance Authority, she said, voice suddenly thin. Per shareholder majority via proxy or direct conversion, any Class F stakeholder holding over 60% may call emergency governance review, execute board audit, and reassign executive appointments pending board ratification. Ryan leaned back, waving her off. That's boilerplate from 20 years ago. We've got Series D bylaws now. Andrea didn't blink. Series D didn't void Class F. They layered on top, and unless someone formally amended the founding charter, and I mean formally, with shareholder vote and state filing, Clause 14 still holds. Ryan blinked. Wait, are you saying... I'm saying, Andrea cut in, he might actually be able to call that meeting. Legally. Silence. Across town, Ian was standing in front of Dock 4 at the company's old logistics hub. The place smelled like pallet dust, machine oil, and real work. None of that curated lavender nonsense from HQ's wellness floor. It was a place of motion, of steel. And to the people there, Ian wasn't former. He was foundational. Mr. M, a forklift operator called out from the bay. His name tag read Reggie, and he hadn't changed much since the last time Ian ran operations hands-on. Didn't think we'd see you here again. I could say the same, Ian replied, offering the man a firm handshake. He walked through the facility, nodding to old faces, noting who was still there. He passed Janet in receiving. She paused mid-scan and gave him a quiet smile. Still wearing the same jacket, huh, Mr. M? Still fits, Ian said, tapping the patch on his sleeve. Built this place wearing it. They made their way to the old corner office, now used as a break room. He found Nolan there, senior logistics manager, a workhorse, never polished, but never dropped the ball. Ian poured them both coffee from a dented pot that hadn't been replaced in a decade. If I needed your vote on something, Ian asked, voice low, would I have it? Nolan didn't hesitate. You never asked for credit, just results. Always said the warehouse didn't care who got the credit, just who showed up. Ian nodded once. I might need you to show up again, just once more. Outside, 2 more dock workers leaned on the railing and watched him walk out. He's really gone? One asked. The other shook his head. Doesn't look like a man who's gone. Looks like a man making rounds. They still called him Mr. M. No one told them to. No memo went out. No corporate farewell email. That's just who he was. Even now. Back at HQ, Ryan tried to brush off the nerves by scheduling another team-building offsite and floating the idea of themed Slack emojis to boost morale. But the unease was spreading. Legal had gone quiet. Ops leads were unusually slow to reply, and someone from finance had just asked to re-review historical equity holdings. Something was moving under the surface, not loud, not flashy, just inevitable. The PDF loaded slowly, each percentage tick a nail through Ryan's thinning patience. He stood over Andrea's desk, half bent, radiating caffeine and indignation, while legal clicked through the preliminary shareholder roll. A routine compliance request, he thought. Just something to stall the old man. Then the cursor stopped. Andrea didn't say a word. She just turned the screen toward him and tapped a line halfway down. He squinted, confused at first, and then... Entity, Ridge Pine Holdings, LLC stake, 83.2% beneficial owner, Silvertree Voting Trust, formerly under proxy, converted to direct majority control, active. The silence hit first. Then came the heat, like all the blood in his body had decided to sprint in the wrong direction. 83, he croaked, the edge of a laugh caught somewhere between disbelief and a full-body dry heave. What the hell is this? This can't be right. Andrea didn't look up. It's been validated twice. The trust was structured through legacy Class F shares. He's been quietly acquiring stakes for over 15 years. But why wasn't this flagged? Ryan snapped. Why didn't you tell me? Andrea slid a manila folder across the table. Inside, a dated onboarding memo. You were advised to request a full cap table review during transition. You declined. Said you were not interested in old paper ghosts. He stared at the folder like it was written in Martian. I thought the trust was just ceremonial. You assumed, she said. No pity in her tone, just tired precision. You never asked who held the proxy, so we followed the existing structure. The pieces started connecting in Ryan's head, but it was like trying to catch a knife as it fell. Ian had never shown up on the main registry. His name wasn't tied to any Series D options or voting groups, because he didn't want it to be, because he was waiting. And now, after being iced out, he hadn't called a lawyer. He hadn't begged for reinstatement. He'd pulled the damn ripcord on the entire corporate parachute. A new email arrived. From Ian. Subject, Final Board Agenda. Ryan clicked it like it might explode. There were only 5 items, all clinical. Audit review, bylaws revision, governance reconstitution, leadership restructuring, and the last line, board seat reassignments. 2 pending. Pending. As in, they were already gone. Just not told yet. Ryan shoved away from the desk and stormed into the executive lounge, slamming the door behind him. A few junior staffers jumped. The intern who managed the internal podcast made a note to cut his interview segment for the week. Everyone felt it. The shift. The scent of panic and cologne and expensive wool. He paced, then shouted into his phone, demanding a call with the head of investor relations. But even as the call rang, he knew. The investors didn't care who wore the suit. They cared who held the reins. And Ian? Ian hadn't just shown up to reclaim a desk. He'd shown up to bury the regime. Somewhere across the building, the executive printer whirred to life, printing copies of the new agenda. No fanfare. Just quiet preparation for a board meeting that was no longer a formality. It was now a reckoning. At 8:58 a.m., the boardroom was already full, though no one was speaking. The silence wasn't respectful. It was suffocating. Executives sipped coffee like it might double as an antidote. Ryan sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, fingers drumming a little too fast. He'd worn a darker suit than usual, less keynote ready, more damage control. The investors on screen from New York weren't smiling. Andrea from legal sat near the door, her laptop open, face unreadable. Then the door opened and Ian walked in. No fanfare, no clipboard, just the same fleece vest and steady gait. He didn't sit. He didn't need to. He placed a folder at the end of the table, his end now, and opened it without a word. The only sound was the air system clicking on above them. Let's begin, Ian said. No tremor, no emphasis. Just the voice of a man who'd waited long enough. I'll keep this short, he continued, sliding a single page forward. This is a list of all executive decisions made without shareholder majority oversight over the last 18 months. New hires, expense authorizations, vendor shifts, DEI rebranding consultants, culture platform investments. You'll see the original budget approvals here. He tapped a column. And the actuals here. He passed copies down the table. Now, I'd like to ask each of you something simple, Ian said, folding his hands. Did you vet this expense? He looked at CFO Callan, who froze. No, Callan muttered. It was greenlit by strategy. And this hire? He asked the CHRO, sliding a page across. I was told it was aligned with investor priorities, she said quickly, eyes darting to the screen. This strategy? Ian asked Ryan, now visibly sweating. It was an agile realignment, Ryan said, voice pitched, approved by the branding task force. Ian didn't smile. He just blinked slowly. The one with no board review, no reporting requirement, and no internal audit trail? Ryan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Ian straightened the pages in front of him. This company was built with care, with control, with accountability. That's why I didn't raise my voice before, because this wasn't about noise. He stood still for a breath, then turned to Andrea. I invoke a vote of no confidence in the current executive structure. No one shouted, no table slams, just slow, inevitable movement as one by one, hands raised, even the two investors on the screen. Quiet clicks of a mouse, a nod, a note. Motion carries, Andrea confirmed. Majority reached, restructure authorized. Ian closed his folder. Ryan leaned forward, trying to conjure up some of the showmanship he used to blindside us in meetings. You can't just replace an entire leadership team overnight. Ian finally looked directly at him. That's funny. You did. No one laughed. As the meeting wound down, a few execs leaned in close to Ian, quiet voices, hushed tones, whispers of, if there's a place for me under the new structure, I'd be honored. And, I always respected your leadership. Just tell me where I can help. Ian nodded politely, said nothing. He didn't come for favorites. He didn't come for apologies. He came to reset the table, and now that the hands were raised, the house of cards was coming down. Quietly, precisely, permanently. Ryan leaned back in his chair, desperation fraying the corners of his voice. You don't understand modern governance, he said, the words coming fast now, panicked, like a man trying to unbuckle his seatbelt mid-crash. This isn't how we handle restructures in the current landscape. You're making a massive reputational error. I built the logistics backbone, Ian said quietly, cutting through the room like a scalpel. You built debt. Silence. Ryan blinked, stunned, like he hadn't expected to be interrupted, like his voice still carried authority, but it didn't. Not anymore. Not in this room. Not in a room where every vote had already been counted and every page already signed. Ian didn't move theatrically. No dramatic flair. Just reached into his folder and withdrew a single envelope, thicker than it looked. He passed it to Andrea, who stood and distributed its contents with the precision of a closing attorney. 10 envelopes. Cream stock, corporate watermark, each one with a name in careful black ink, final notices, termination letters for every member of the executive team, effective immediately, reviewed, notarized, and enforceable, including Ryan's. Some eyes widened. Others dropped to the table. One exec exhaled slowly through his nose, like he'd known this day was coming but prayed it wouldn't. Authority for these actions has been verified, Andrea said, emotionless. Corporate compliance is in place. Severance will be administered per clause 6.2 of your amended contracts. Ryan stood now, half lunging across the table. You don't get to do this. This is my company. Ian didn't flinch. It was your performance deck. This is still my company. Before Ryan could reply, the boardroom door opened. 2 members of security entered. Not aggressive, not rushed, just professional. Like they were showing up for a scheduled service call. They looked to Ian, who gave the slightest nod. Ryan's mouth moved, but no sound came out. He looked around the room for support, for a glance, a nod, anything. But no one met his eyes. Not one. The same C-suite team that had cheered when he replaced Ian were now staring at the table, their hands folded like students awaiting detention. I'll contest this, Ryan muttered as the guards approached. You'll see. You should, Ian said. It'll give the new leadership time to clean up your mess. One of the guards opened the door. Ryan didn't move. For a moment, it looked like he might shout, might launch into one of those classic vision alignment tirades he loved so much. But nothing came. Not a word. He walked out the same way Ian once had, but no one clapped. No one reached out. No one spoke. Ian watched him go, then turned back to the room. Effective immediately, I'm naming interim leadership. He placed a slim binder on the table. Karen Delaney will serve as CEO during transition. She knows the ops systems better than anyone in this room. I mentored her 10 years ago. She kept the lights on while the rest of you were at offsites. A murmur, quick and quiet. Karen? Warehouse Karen? Ian didn't smile, but his eyes said enough. It's time to rebuild from the inside out. He didn't wait for applause. There wouldn't be any. Just stunned silence and a chair left spinning slowly at the head of the table. The office didn't look different. Same glass walls, same curated succulents, same brand palette of ocean blue and mindful beige. But something had shifted, like the air pressure had dropped. You could feel it in the halls, in the way people stopped speaking in acronyms, in the way Slack threads actually slowed down and emails got clearer. Ian never moved back into his old office, didn't even sit at the head of any table. He worked quietly from a small room near the freight elevator, one of the old supply closets they'd converted into a workstation years ago. No nameplate, no title, just a laptop, a stack of operations briefs, and a rotating cast of department leads sitting down one by one to explain what was broken and what they needed to fix it. He didn't yell, didn't micromanage, just asked the same 3 questions again and again. What do you need to do it right? What did the last guy ignore? What don't I see yet? And that was it. Marketing's influencer budget was quietly slashed by 70%. No email, no memo, just a calendar invite that disappeared overnight. The Director of Brand Identity Experience role was phased out entirely, replaced with a former fulfillment supervisor named Trey, who'd saved the company 6 figures last year by rerouting packaging vendors during a shortage. Trey didn't even own a suit, and no one cared. Karen Delaney, interim CEO, ran a lean ship. Weekly ops reviews, floor walkthroughs, a standing invite in her calendar that simply read, "Ask me anything. Warehouse. Wednesdays, 11:1. Employees started whispering. He never raised his voice. He never had to. You feel it, right? Like, it's working again. There were no big press releases, no brand relaunch, just a steady, unmistakable hum of competence returning. Vendor payments stabilized. Retention went up. 3 major clients who'd been circling the exit re-upped their contracts without being asked. One of them wrote in their renewal note, "Glad to see the grown-ups are back." The media caught on weeks later. A tech blog ran a quiet headline. Strategic correction by legacy investors brings Silvertree back to core. No clickbait, no drama, just 4 paragraphs of clean, respectful reporting. The photo they used wasn't Ian. It was the original warehouse, half-built, covered in dust and scaffolding. That night, Ian got an email. 1 line, no subject. "Glad you kept the soul intact. E. Evan." The co-founder, the only other person who'd known where the bones were buried and how the walls were poured. Ian didn't reply, just stared at the screen for a moment, then opened the company charter and added 1 more clause to the governance guidelines. From this point forward, any sitting CEO was required to meet in person with core operations staff once a month. No delegation, no proxies, a chair would be reserved, no exceptions. He didn't announce it, didn't share it at a town hall, he just filed it. Not revenge, not victory laps, just restoration, 1 bolt at a time. The new boardroom was cleaner, sleeker, all muted brass and frosted glass, with a conference table so long it looked like it belonged in a Bond villain's lair. But the feeling in the room? Different. Calmer. Grounded. Karen stood at the head now, not as interim anything, but as the CEO. Her badge said so. Her voice said so. No theatrics, no jargon, just steady, practiced clarity as she walked investors through quarterlies that didn't need spin. Margins up, retention solid, vendor disputes down to 0. Forecasts grounded in reality, not caffeine-fueled ambition. Ian sat quietly near the far end, not in charge, not even introduced, just present. Karen glanced his way once, near the close, and he gave the smallest of nods. When the numbers were done, and the investors gave their polite nods and murmurs of approval, Ian rose, not to take the floor, just to speak, for a moment. "This isn't about me," he said, looking around the table. "It never was, and it shouldn't be." His voice was soft, but the kind that made people lean in without realizing it. It's about not forgetting who actually keeps the lights on, not the logos, not the taglines, the people who know how to fix the circuit when it burns out. He turned to the far wall, took a small frame out of his bag, walked over and hung it next to the framed IPO announcement and the Series D press clipping. The photo was old, faded in spots. 5 people standing in front of a half-built warehouse, hoodies, steel-toed boots, smiles that weren't for show. The original crew, back when the name Silvertree meant something other than scalable synergy and branded mugs. No one said a word. Ian looked once at the room. No pride, no sadness, just completion. Then he turned to the door, paused, and said, almost to himself, "Dismiss the quiet ones all you want. Just don't forget to check the ownership." He didn't wait for applause. He didn't need it. The door clicked softly behind him. Karen stood taller. The boardroom refocused. The company would move forward, but with memory, with roots. Out in the hallway, Ian kept walking. Past the founder wall, past the etched glass slogan, past the same reception desk where a year ago they'd tried to erase him. Final thought, quiet as the air that followed him. They tried to erase a role. I erased the regime.
Bye-bye.